Do you believe that some souls never leave the hospital? At night, when patients are fast asleep and the dim hallway lights cast hazy reflections on the cold tile floor, deep within the hospital, in a place no one wants to go, lies the morgue. It isn't just a place where bodies are kept. It's a sanctuary of forgotten secrets, and a place where unnamed cries echo through the stillness of midnight. This is a true story, told by someone who lived it. If you have the courage, come with us into the morgue of DH Hospital, where darkness comes not only from the absence of light. My name is Tuan. I'm 25 years old, a final year nursing student. What I'm about to share isn't meant to scare you or leave you haunted, but to remind you that in this world, there are things science simply cannot explain, and sometimes, just one fleeting moment is enough to step into the world of unsettled souls. 3 months ago, I was assigned to a night shift internship at DH Hospital, a large medical facility on the outskirts of the city. It's known for its modern emergency department, but few people know that right next to it is the old morgue. Built during the French colonial era, with low ceilings, peeling lime walls, and a constant, faint scent of formalin hanging in the air, I wasn't afraid of ghosts. Or at least, I thought I wasn't, until my first night on duty at the morgue. That night, my shift began at 10 p.m. The previous nurse handed over the shift hastily, saying only one sentence. Drawer number 3 just received the body of a woman who died in childbirth. Keep an eye on it, the forensic doctor hasn't examined her yet. So the drawer isn't fully closed. I nodded, thinking nothing of it, but as soon as he turned away, I felt a chill run down my spine, like a gust of wind blowing out from within the morgue. Even though all the doors were shut, the morgue had 6 refrigeration drawers, large, horizontal units, each designed to hold one body. Drawer number 3 was tucked in the corner, beneath a flickering light that blinked in erratic rhythms. I checked the logbook. The deceased was named Lati Min Han, 28 years old, who had passed away due to postpartum hemorrhage. The baby survived, but Ms. Han passed away at 5 p.m. that very day. I sighed softly, placed the file back on the desk, and went about checking the drawers as per protocol. When I reached drawer number 3, I noticed it was only slightly ajar, not fully closed. I carefully put on gloves, gently opened the door for a final inspection before sealing it, and then, I froze. Her face, the young woman lying still in the mist of cold air, still bore a light layer of makeup. Her eyes were closed, but at the corner of her eye was a wet trail. As if someone had just cried. I leaned closer. It was indeed liquid. A single tear clung to her left cheek. Not yet dry. Startled, I pulled back, stepping away. My mind scrambled for explanations. Perhaps condensation. Maybe sweat. But why only one drop? And clearly from the corner of the eye? I didn't have the courage to examine further. I closed the drawer and returned to the desk, opening the logbook with trembling hands. Around midnight, when the hospital had gone quiet, I sat alone in the duty room, a space barely 20 square meters. The dim neon light flickered overhead, and the ceiling fan creaked with a slow clack, clack. I closed my eyes, trying to calm myself, but then, a faint sound slipped into my ears and made me jolt upright. It was crying, soft, very soft, like a woman's sobs, stifled in her throat. I stood up abruptly, my heart pounded. The sound was coming from inside. From drawer number 3, I walked slowly, step by step. A suffocating feeling gripped my chest, as if someone was squeezing my lungs. I pressed my ear to the drawer. I froze. The sound became clearer. My baby. My baby. I'm sorry. I couldn't stand any longer. I ran back to the duty room, locked the door, held my head, eyes wide open, staring at the clock. It was exactly 2:37 a.m. I didn't dare call anyone. I didn't dare go back. Not until 6 a.m. when the shift ended and morning sunlight crept through the window, did I finally muster the courage to open the door and check drawer number 3 again. Everything was as it had been, but the tear from the night before had vanished. The note on the desk had been blown to the floor by the wind. I bent down to pick it up, and on the back, written in unfamiliar handwriting, was a scrawled message. "Don't let my child lose her mother." I couldn't explain it. That night, I submitted a request to transfer departments. But it wasn't approved. The head doctor just smiled and said, "You're probably just new, not used to the morgue's scent yet." I didn't dare tell anyone. Everyone would think I was delusional. But in the nights that followed, the crying returned, growing clearer each time. And I knew, the souls in that morgue weren't just the dead. They were unfinished lives. Stories that never got to say goodbye, never got to close their eyes in peace. And I, whether I liked it or not, had become a witness to the secrets buried in the dark. I thought that after that first night, things would get better, that maybe it was just stress. Maybe my imagination as a fresh intern was too vivid. But the truth is, the second night was even more haunting than the first. That night, the morgue was as still as ever. I arrived earlier than usual, trying my best not to glance toward drawer number 3 again, even though I knew the woman had already been cremated that morning. Just walking past that corner gave me chills. I made myself a hot cup of coffee, telling myself that every job has its challenges. I couldn't stay weak forever. Everything remained quiet until just before 1 a.m. As I sat at the desk, nodding off slightly, the hallway lights suddenly went out. The entire morgue was swallowed in darkness. Only the faint glow of the desk lamp remained. I jumped to my feet, reaching for my phone, when I heard it, a slow, rhythmic tap, tap, tap. The sound of a wooden cane tapping against the cement floor. I stepped into the hallway, my heart racing. The sound came from the end of the hall, where a window looked out onto the backyard. Near the old parking lot, I walked closer. Cold wind seeped in through the cracks. And then, I saw someone standing just outside the window. A small, hunched figure, holding a cane and tapping it steadily. The moonlight revealed enough for me to see clearly. It was an elderly woman in a patient gown. Long white hair flowing, wrinkled skin, and sunken eyes staring directly inside. I stood frozen. I didn't understand why my legs wouldn't move. She didn't say a word, just stood there, then tapped her cane 3 times, slowly turned around, and walked away, vanishing into the darkness at the far end of the yard. I backed away, shut the door tightly, and with trembling hands, called the security guard, but he said just one sentence, "You saw her again, didn't you?" I was stunned. I wasn't the only one who had seen her. He sighed and said, "I've worked here for 8 years. That woman, she was a psychiatric patient, died a long time ago. No one came to claim her body. It was left in the morgue for too long, and eventually cremated in a mass burial." I asked, "Why does she stand there?" He replied, "They say, she's looking for something. Every year, around this time, she appears, just stands there, staring inside, 3 taps, then vanishes." That night, I didn't dare sleep. My eyes were glued to the surveillance screen. But what sent a chill down my spine was that the footage showed nothing. No old woman, but her cane remained. An old wooden cane, faintly engraved with the number 06, lying just beneath the window. I brought it inside and placed it in the cabinet. I spent the rest of the night tossing and turning, asking myself, if she was a ghost, how could she leave behind something real? The next morning, I told the head nurse what had happened. He just shook his head. "Don't overthink it. There are many things about the morgue we don't talk about. Since you're on night duty, it's best to just follow protocol. Don't ask too many questions." But in his eyes, I saw a flicker of unease, as if he had seen something too, but chose to remain silent. That evening, I arrived early and quietly brought the cane to the backyard, placing it exactly where I had last seen the old woman. I hoped that if she still had unfinished business, she would understand I meant no harm. As I turned to leave, a sudden gust slammed the window shut with a loud bang. I spun around. No one was there, but the cane was gone. That night, throughout my entire shift, I didn't hear the tapping again. But something strange happened. While checking the logbook, I noticed drawer number 6, the one used for unidentified bodies, had been opened. But I was sure I had locked it with a number padlock. The lock was still there, intact, but the door was wide open. Inside, it was empty. The body was gone. I reported it to the forensic doctor. He reviewed the footage and asked, "Are you sure you didn't write the wrong number? Drawer 6 has been empty since yesterday." But I wasn't mistaken. I had written everything clearly: date, time, coded ID, signed my name, and that body had vanished like it never existed. I left that shift with a strange sense of unease. It felt like what I was witnessing was no longer random. The crying, the figure by the window, the cane left behind, and a missing corpse, all of it was starting to paint a larger picture, thick with shadows, buried truths, and messages from souls that hadn't yet found peace. I knew this was only the beginning. After 2 haunting night shifts, I started living in a state of limbo, somewhere between reason and confusion. Every time I stepped into the morgue, it felt like I was descending deeper into another world, a place where not everyone truly leaves after they die. But the story didn't stop there. The following week, I was assigned to assist in transferring a body from operating room 5 to the morgue. A simple task: sign the paperwork, confirm the identity, and follow protocol during transport. But just hearing the words, "operating room 5 inches," made the experienced nurses fall silent. They exchanged glances, and the oldest among them said quietly, "Tuan is used to the morgue. Let him go. Just don't stay in there too long." I didn't understand. Aren't all operating rooms the same? The deceased was a 34-year-old woman admitted with severe mitral valve stenosis. She needed emergency surgery. The operation took place in the late afternoon, but she didn't survive due to cardiac complications. When I arrived at operating room 5, the hallway lights were a pale yellow, and the white tile floor felt icy under my hands. The door was slightly ajar, and the lights inside were still on. I gently pushed it open. The smell of blood and antiseptic hung thick in the air, clinging to my throat. The woman's body was already covered with a white sheet on the operating table. No more blood, no more sounds. But in that room, there was a strange feeling, as if someone else was still there, quietly watching. I approached, gently lifted the sheet to match her identity with the records. And then suddenly, the lights flickered, then went out. The entire room was plunged into darkness. I stood still, my hand resting on the edge of the sheet. The silence was absolute. Then, from the far corner of the room, came a clinking sound, metal hitting the floor. I aimed my flashlight toward the noise. A surgical scissor lay on the ground, its blade faintly smeared with blood. But I clearly remembered. All instruments had already been collected in the sterile tray. Why was it here? The lights suddenly came back on. I looked around. Everything seemed unchanged. But on the woman's left wrist was a fresh bloodstain, still wet, slowly seeping into the white cloth. I stepped back, hands trembling, hastily covered her, signed the papers, and pushed the gurney out of the room. That night, the body was stored in drawer 5, eerily matching the number of the operating room. I stayed at the front desk, my eyes constantly drifting toward that freezer. At 2 a.m., just as sleep was creeping in, a soft alarm rang out. Not loud, but enough to jolt me awake. It came from drawer 5. I ran over and checked the lock system. Still sealed. No one had opened it. But the red warning light flashed, indicating a sudden temperature change inside. I opened the maintenance log to verify. Everything was normal, except for the last entry. Drawer 5 to 2:11 a.m. Temperature rose by 4 degrees within 2 minutes. That's impossible. Morgue freezers are tightly regulated. There's no way it could heat up like that on its own. I reviewed the morgue's surveillance footage, and nearly dropped the USB when I saw it. In the clip of drawer 5, a figure appeared behind it. A woman in surgical clothing, hair loose, tilting her head close to the drawer, as if whispering. I rewound and played it again, over and over. The footage lasted only 5 seconds. Then gone. I reached for my phone to call my supervisor, but there was no signal. All I could do was sit frozen, gripping my pen tightly, eyes fixed on the cold steel door. An hour later, the light stopped flashing. Everything returned to normal, but I did not. The next morning, I went to the chief doctor's office and handed him the footage. He watched it silently, then slowly removed his glasses, sighed, and said, "Operating room 5. Should have been shut down last year. I was confused. Why? It's still being used regularly. He shook his head. You don't know. Last year, a patient died there because a nurse administered the wrong medication. The family sued all the way up to the ministry. That nurse, she committed suicide right in the operating room. Ever since then, something happens every year around this time. I stood frozen, recalling the blood-stained hand, the fallen scissors, and the shadow behind the morgue drawer. He added, she hasn't moved on, and it seems, this time, she refuses to die in silence. I left his office in a daze. That evening, when I returned to the morgue, I opened drawer number 5 to check it one last time. But it was empty. No body. I was stunned. Turning to the logbook, someone had signed out the body at 3 a.m., but the signature was mine. Clearly written, my pen, my handwriting, but I never signed it. Never moved the body. I collapsed into the chair, palms cold and sweaty. Then, the white sheet that had covered the body, still stained with flecks of blood, was lying on my desk. Someone had left it, like a final message from the other side. I didn't know what that spirit wanted, but I understood. The truth had never been told, and that these kinds of deaths would keep repeating. After the incident in OR 5, I lived in a state of growing doubt and fear. Spirits I once thought existed only in whispered rumors now revealed themselves clearly during every night shift. Each time I felt I'd grown used to the chill of the morgue. Something else happened, like someone was slowly leading me deeper, to the core of secrets buried between life and death. The third night that week, I was on shift alone. The nurse scheduled with me called out for personal reasons, and the security guard was tied up with a case in the I was alone in the morgue. At 2:40 a.m., I was still at my desk. Back aching, eyes burning from trying not to doze off. Outside, light rain tapped steadily against the windows, like whispers from somewhere far away. I was just about to make another cup of coffee when the lights flickered. The ceiling light blinked a few times, then went out, leaving only the soft glow of the computer screen. But what scared me wasn't the darkness, it was the dry metallic click echoing from the end of the hall. A sound I recognized instantly. The sound of a morgue drawer being opened. And it happened just as the clock ticked over to 3 o'clock. I didn't rush out. My hands were trembling, heart pounding, but my duty forced me to check. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped into the hallway. The cold air wrapped around me like a shroud. I aimed the beam toward the row of morgue drawers. One drawer was wide open. Number 6. I remembered clearly. It held the body of a young boy, around 7 years old, who had died in a traffic accident. I had personally received the body at 7 p.m. that evening. It had been properly sealed. But now, the drawer was open. The number lock lay on the floor, fully unlatched. No signs of tampering. I stepped closer. Inside, nothing. The body was gone. I swept my flashlight across the room, heart pounding. A freezing gust of wind blew across my back, making every hair on my body stand on end. I spun around. On the wall behind me, a small bloody handprint. 5 tiny fingers dragged downward, like someone had tried to claw their way out in desperation. I reached out and touched it. The blood was warm, still fresh. I rushed back to my desk and rebooted the surveillance system. But the footage between 2:30 and 3:05 a.m. was completely corrupted. Just flickering static. I grabbed the phone to call the chief doctor, but, as usual, there was no signal. At that moment, a soft sound came from just outside the office door. Click, click, someone lightly tapping on the glass. I stared through the thin curtain. Rain still fell steadily. No one there, but something was dangling from the door handle. I slowly opened the door. It was a rusty toy car. The wind-up kind, very old. My hand trembled as I picked it up. It was the exact toy I'd seen gripped in the fingers of the boy's body. I had watched his family place it there before sealing him inside the drawer. No one else could have known that. I placed the car on the desk and backed away. Then, it began to move. On its own, it rolled in small circles. Then stopped. One wheel let out a soft squeak. In that moment, I felt someone standing directly behind me. The air thickened. I didn't dare turn around. A child's giggle whispered right into my ear. Faint, close, I shut my eyes. Someone, lightly touched the back of my shirt. When I turned, nothing. Just the toy car, motionless on the desk, its wheels still ticking. Click, click, click. The next morning, I checked the camera system again. It had auto-reset, but the corrupted footage was unrecoverable. I filed a report to the hospital leaders, but they only gave me skeptical looks. Maybe they thought I'd fallen asleep and made up a story to cover my mistake. I knew no one believed me, but at 11 a.m. that day, the hospital admitted a new emergency case. It was the chief forensic doctor. The same man who'd examined the boy's body the night before. He had been hit by a car on his way to work, suffered brain trauma, and in his wallet, they found a small scrap of paper. On it, scribbled in the shaky handwriting of a child, "You were the first one who saw me, and didn't say anything." From that moment on, I knew I was no longer just a bystander. I had become the keeper of secrets, of forgotten souls still wandering in silence. And what terrified me more was the thought that I might not have the courage to see it through to the end. Since the night drawer number 6 opened on its own at exactly 3 a.m., I no longer felt like a regular intern. It was as if I had been dragged into a strange investigation where every clue blurred the line between reality and the supernatural, between the living and the dead. Every time I thought things had calmed down, something new would happen, and this time, it was a vehicle. An old ambulance, so old that it hadn't been used in years, left abandoned beside the waste lot behind the morgue, a place most staff avoided. Especially at night, the vehicle had no license plate, a shattered windshield, bare tires, flaking paint, and rust crawling across the doors. I once asked the security guard, why not sell it for scrap or get rid of it? He simply shook his head and said, just leave it. The higher-ups said not to touch it. Then he went silent, offering no further explanation. That night, I was on duty alone as usual. A heavy downpour pounded against the windows, wind gusting so fiercely that the glass trembled. I was entering data when suddenly, the ambulance siren wailed from outside. That familiar, chilling sound pierced through the quiet, tearing the silence wide open. I jumped to my feet, heart racing, and ran to the door. In the empty lot out back, the old ambulance, its headlights were flashing, engine roaring, and yet, I knew for a fact it was beyond repair. No battery, no key. Still, it roared like a beast. Siren blaring, lights flashing relentlessly. No one else came out to look. Only me. I stood frozen. Then, the rear door creaked open. From about 20 meters away, I saw someone step out, wearing a white lab coat. Tall, slender, with long hair falling loosely. But the face was unclear. The flashing lights distorted the figure, like they were stuck between two worlds. I aimed my flashlight at them, but the moment the beam hit, the figure vanished. The lights shut off. Silence. The vehicle looked as though it had never moved. I tried convincing myself it was just an illusion. But the next morning, while checking the hallway cameras, I found a strange clip. At 3:17 a.m., footage from the emergency wing, far from the morgue, showed a deceased patient being wheeled out. Then, midway down the corridor, the body disappeared. The gurney rolled on, empty. Yet both the attending doctor and nurse swore the body was still there when they left the room. No one could explain it. 3:17 a.m., the exact time the siren had gone off. Later that afternoon, I returned to the abandoned vehicle. A breeze rustled the overgrown grass, the sun casting a pale light over its rusted frame. I quietly opened the rear door. Inside, everything was coated in thick dust. But on the floor, there was a human-shaped indentation, as if someone had just lain there. I didn't step in, but as I turned to leave, something caught my eye near the wheel. A piece of white cloth, identical to the morgue's body covers. I picked it up. On the hem, a smeared message written in black ink. I died in this ambulance. No one knows. I brought the cloth back to the duty room and hid it in my drawer. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the monitors. At 3:15 a.m., the ambulance lit up again. But this time, no siren. It started up and began to move. Despite its flat tires, it slowly turned and rolled around the back lot, like someone was driving it. I rushed to the window. There was no one inside. No driver. No patient. But in the rear compartment, the white sheet I had hidden was now neatly spread out. Clean. Not a speck of dust. The next morning, I told the old security guard everything. He went quiet for a long while. Then finally whispered, 10 years ago, a resident doctor went missing after a night shift. She left the got in that ambulance to go home, but never made it. The vehicle was found 3 days later, this one, behind the morgue, but inside, no body. No blood, no signs of struggle, just scattered medical files. Her body was never found. No one knows what happened. And since then, every year, on the same date, the ambulance starts up, circles the yard, like it's trying to return to where it started. I stood in silence, chilled to the bone. That ambulance, it had never forgotten its final passenger. And each time the siren cried in the night, it was a reminder, a soul still wandering the hospital's hallways. A sorrow that had never found peace. After witnessing that ambulance move on its own, I began to understand, what was happening around me was no longer random. These events were connected, weaving a pattern of secrets buried deep within the hospital. But I never expected the next thing I'd find to be a letter. A handwritten letter, trembling and folded as if the writer had never gotten the chance to send it. That day, I was assigned to review the death records of unidentified bodies. In an old, rusty drawer, I discovered a thick, dusty file. No barcode, no hospital stamp, just a handwritten label. Ward D2 year 2008. D2 had once been the psych ward, now repurposed for storage. Inside that file, I found a folded piece of yellowed paper, the ink smudged from moisture. I slowly opened it and began to read. The next morning, I went to the chief doctor's office and handed him the footage. He watched it silently, then slowly removed his glasses, sighed, and said, "Operating room 5 should have been shut down last year." I was confused. Why? It's still being used regularly. He shook his head. "You don't know. Last year, a patient died there because a nurse administered the wrong medication. The family sued all the way up to the ministry. That nurse, she committed suicide right in the operating room. Ever since then, something happens every year around this time." I stood frozen, recalling the blood-stained hand, the fallen scissors, and the shadow behind the morgue drawer. He added, "She hasn't moved on, and it seems, this time, she refuses to die in silence." I left his office in a daze. That evening, when I returned to the morgue, I opened drawer number 5 to check it one last time. But it was empty. No body. I was stunned. Turning to the logbook, someone had signed out the body at 3 a.m., but the signature was mine. Clearly written, my pen, my handwriting, but I never signed it. Never moved the body. I collapsed into the chair, palms cold and sweaty. Then, the white sheet that had covered the body, still stained with flecks of blood, was lying on my desk. Someone had left it, like a final message from the other side. I didn't know what that spirit wanted, but I understood. The truth had never been told, and deaths like hers would happen again. After the incident in operating room 5, I began living with a deep sense of doubt and fear. The spirits I once thought were just part of rumors now appeared vividly during my night shifts. Every time I thought I had grown accustomed to the coldness of the morgue, something stranger would happen, like someone was slowly leading me deeper into the core of secrets buried between life and death. On the third night of that week, I was on duty alone. The nurse who shared shifts with me had taken leave for personal reasons, and the security guard was busy dealing with an emergency in the I was the only one left in the morgue. At 2:40 a.m., I was still sitting at the duty desk, my back aching and eyes stinging from forcing them open. Outside, a light drizzle tapped against the window pane, creating a steady, distant rhythm like whispers from far away. I was about to make another cup of coffee when the electricity flickered. The ceiling lights blinked a few times, then went out completely, leaving only the faint glow of the computer screen. But what truly frightened me wasn't the darkness, it was the dry, metallic sound from the end of the hallway, a loud click, like something heavy made of metal being unlatched. I froze. That sound, I knew it. It was the morgue freezer door opening. And it happened just as the clock on the monitor ticked to 3 o'clock. I didn't step out immediately. My hands trembled, heart pounding, but my training urged me forward. I grabbed a flashlight and walked out into the hallway. Cold air clung to my body. I aimed the light toward the row of morgue freezers. One door was wide open. It was drawer number 6. I remembered clearly. That was where the body of a 7-year-old boy lay. A victim of a traffic accident. I had personally received his body at 7 p.m. and sealed it properly. But now, the door was flung open, and the combination lock lay on the floor, intact, but unlatched. No signs of tampering. I stepped closer. Inside, it was empty. The body was gone. I swept the flashlight around the room. Heart thudding. A cold gust of wind blew across my back, raising every hair on my skin. I turned sharply. On the wall behind me, a small handprint in blood. 5 tiny fingers dragged downward, as if someone had slid down the wall in desperation. I reached out to touch it. The blood was still warm, still wet. I rushed back to the desk and pulled up the camera feed. But the footage from 2:30 to 3:05 was static, horizontal white and black lines across the screen. I picked up the phone to call the chief doctor. As usual, no signal. Just then, a soft tapping sound came from outside the duty room door. Tap, tap, someone knocking on the glass. I stared through the thin curtain. Outside, rain continued falling steadily. No one there, but something dangled from the door handle. I slowly opened the door. It was a rusted toy car, an old-fashioned wind-up model. My hand trembled as I picked it up. It was the same toy I had seen clutched in the boy's hand when I accepted his body. I had watched the family place it there themselves. No one else knew that detail, except me. I set the toy on the desk and stepped back. And then, it moved on its own. No one wound it up. It rolled in a circle, then stopped, its wheel emitting a faint screech. In that moment, I felt someone standing directly behind me. The air thickened. I didn't dare turn around. A child's giggle whispered right next to my ear. Very soft, very close. I shut my eyes. Someone's hand lightly touched the back of my shirt. But when I turned, no one was there. Only the toy car sat silently on the desk, its wheels slowly turning, clicking, tick, tick, one click at a time. I knew that was Mrs. Tin. Her spirit still lingered there, clinging to the only hope she had left, that her daughter would one day understand that her mother had never been insane. And that death wasn't a release, but a silent scream buried deep in silence. I didn't know who her daughter was, but from that moment on, I knew I had to find her. After discovering the letter from the departed mother and the forgotten journal, I stopped feeling like just an intern. I felt like a gatekeeper between two worlds. One half lived under the bright, sterile light of medicine and procedure. The other was steeped in darkness, where restless souls kept searching for something unfinished. And then, just when I thought things had calmed down, the little girl appeared. I remember it clearly. It was a night with no rain, no wind, yet the air in the morgue was eerily cold, as if the night's mist had slipped in through the cracked walls. I was typing up reports when I heard laughter. Not an adult's laugh, but a child's giggle, high-pitched, clear, and innocent, like that of a girl under 10. It came from the main entrance of the morgue, a door that should have been locked tight during the night shift. I stood up, flashlight in hand, and walked into the hallway. Under the dim lights, I saw her, a little girl in a white dress with long hair, standing with her back to me. In her hands was an old doll, its head tilted unnaturally to the side, its hair tangled, and most disturbing of all, the eyes were hollowed out. I swallowed hard and stepped closer. "Sweetie, who brought you in here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She didn't answer. The girl slowly turned her head. Her face looked normal, even innocent, but her eyes were terrifyingly empty. And there was something else. I noticed a dark bruise around her neck, like the mark of a rope. I took a step back. She spoke in a small, even voice. "Do you think my doll is pretty?" I didn't know what to say. She held the doll up. It had no eyes, but there were dried bloodstains around the sockets. Before I could react, She turned and dashed down the hallway to the left, toward the records room. I chased after her, heart pounding, but when I got there, nothing. She was gone. Only the doll remained, placed neatly in the middle of the hallway. My hands trembled as I picked it up. The damp cloth reeked of something metallic and foul. I brought it back to the duty room and sealed it inside a plastic bag. Just then, the internal phone rang. No one ever called at night. I picked up the receiver. On the other end, a child's voice said, "Uncle, I'm cold. I can't find my mom." Then silence. I turned toward the bag with the doll, and it was gone. The bag was empty, though I'd zipped it up and left it right beside me. I quickly checked the security cameras. No image of the girl. But the rear hallway cam, at exactly 3:03 a.m., showed a small figure running past, holding the doll, her dress flowing, vanishing just as she reached the far corner. The next morning, I reported everything to the head nurse. He went quiet, then pulled out an old, yellowed newspaper from his drawer. The headline read, "Girl's body found in hospital well, believed to be accidental." The photo showed a girl around 7 years old, long hair, white dress, holding a doll. He explained, that was the daughter of a psychiatric patient who was once treated here. The mother had an episode that night and escaped. They found the girl's body 2 days later in the hospital's maintenance well. No one knows how it happened, but strangely, the doll never floated to the surface. I compared the picture to what I had seen. Her face, her hair, her gaze, all matched. I was speechless. That night, I wasn't on duty, but I still went back to the morgue. At exactly 3 a.m., I placed a new doll on the windowsill, with a handwritten note, "Don't worry. I'll tell your story. You don't have to be cold anymore." I stood there quietly, looking out into the yard. No wind, no sound, but by morning, the doll was gone. And on my desk was the old doll, the eyeless one. But now, the eyes had been stitched shut with rough black thread. I didn't know what it meant, but I felt, maybe the little spirit had smiled. Even if no one remembered, even if no one believed, someone had seen her. Maybe that was all it took to ease the pain that had been left behind. And maybe, just maybe, the darkness had faded a little. I used to think the strange happenings at the morgue would only involve corpses, flickering shadows near the cold drawers, or wandering souls tied to unresolved deaths. But it turns out, the most terrifying thing wasn't below ground. It was above, on the hospital rooftop. It began on a full moon night near the end of the month. The sky was clear, and the moonlight was so bright it cast sharp shadows of every tree onto the courtyard. I was on night duty as usual. Everything was quiet, no alerts, no emergencies. I stepped out into the rear hallway, looked up toward the rooftop of the 8th floor. It had become a habit lately. I didn't know why, but ever since the night I saw the little girl with the eyeless doll, I always felt like someone was watching me from above. That night was no different. On the highest floor of Building B, I saw a figure standing at the edge of the rooftop railing. A white lab coat swayed gently in the wind. Long hair hung down. The face was unclear, but the moonlight was so bright that the silhouette appeared unnervingly sharp. I stared for a few seconds. The figure didn't move, didn't look away, didn't leave, just stood there, watching the courtyard where I was standing. I pulled out my flashlight and pointed it upward, but as soon as the light touched the figure, it vanished, completely, not a trace. I rushed to the security office and asked to review the rooftop camera footage. But during the time frame in question, the video showed nothing, no movement, no one accessed the rooftop. The door remained closed, but I knew I hadn't imagined it. The next night, I secretly went up to the rooftop alone, carrying a single stick of incense. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but my instincts told me something had happened up there. The rooftop wind howled. The air was damp and cold, like no one had stepped foot there in ages. I shone my flashlight around, and then, in a shadowy corner near the water tank, I saw something that shouldn't be there. A small black tin box, rusted, half buried under moss. I picked it up, opened it. Inside was a metal name tag etched with Tran T. Mai, Resident Nurse 2011. Beneath it was an old photo of a girl smiling beside a hospital window. I stared at the photo. It was the same woman I saw on the rooftop the night before. Every detail matched. I brought the box back to the duty room and searched through old staff records on the computer. The name appeared. Tran T. Mai had been a resident nurse who died in 2011. Ruled a suicide from jumping off the hospital rooftop during a solo night shift. Her file listed stress and severe depression as contributing factors. But at the very end of the file, a small note read, "No suicide note left. No witnesses. Body discovered by cleaning staff the next morning." I sat there stunned. A death with no clear explanation. A ghost who stood silently on moonlit nights. And a rusty box that might be the only thing left to prove she ever lived. That night, I returned to the rooftop with the tin box. I lit a stick of incense. Placed the name tag and the photo beside it. I whispered, "If there's something you haven't said, I'm willing to listen." The wind picked up, the incense swayed, and I heard a faint whisper. Right beside my ear. They made me hide the truth. I turned around. No one, but on the concrete floor. Right where I had placed the photo, a small stream of water spread out. Forming the shape of a hand. I bent down. It was a tear. Salty. Warm. And when I looked back at the photo, her eyes had blurred, like she had just cried. I started to grow used to the silent figures wandering the morgue. I no longer screamed when drawers opened by themselves or trembled at the sound of children's laughter echoing through the night. But there was one thing I hadn't yet considered, something seemingly the most normal: people. Because if ghosts could return with such vivid presence, how could I be sure the people I saw were even real? I still remember clearly the first time I met Khan, a young nurse newly transferred to the night shift with me. He was tall, thin, with a kind face and a quiet smile. "You must be Tuan, right? I'll be working nights with you for the next few shifts," Khan said, offering a warm handshake. From that day on, I was no longer alone on my shifts. Khan was hardworking, soft-spoken, always meticulous. He showed me how to organize records, clean tools, and monitor the freezer temperatures. The nights with him felt lighter. I silently thanked fate for sending me a companion in such a cold and haunted place. We talked often, about the job, about unidentified deaths, and the kind of fear only morgue staff could understand. One time, I asked, "How long have you been here?" Khan just smiled. "Long enough to see the things you're seeing now." It was a vague answer. But I didn't think much of it until one night, when our shift schedule changed suddenly. I arrived early and, while waiting to clock in, casually asked the head nurse, "Is Khan working with me tonight?" She looked up, a bit puzzled. "Khan who?" I replied. "Nurse Khan, tall, a bit wavy hair, been doing the night shift with me all week." She paused, then said quietly, "Tuan, we don't have anyone named Khan, especially not in the morgue." I froze, thought she'd forgotten, but I snuck into the staff directory. Typed in the name. Nothing. No Khan, no record, no shifts, no ID, no trace. I went back to the desk and flipped through the sign-in sheet, the one Khan always used to sign. That page was blank. Only my signature. No mention of him. I felt a chill crawl down my spine. He had been here. He'd helped me move bodies, clean rooms, drank coffee with me, talked about life. How could I have imagined all that? I tried to stay calm. Pulled up the security footage from the nights we worked together. In every frame, I was alone. Moving bodies by myself. Unlocking drawers. Walking in and out. Sitting alone at the desk. Talking to empty air. I was stunned. It felt like waking up from a long dream. Only to realize the one comfort I had was never real. Desperate, I searched for anything that could prove he had existed. Then, inside a drawer, I found a small folded note. No sign anyone had left it. On it was Khan's familiar handwriting. "Don't be afraid, I never left you alone. It's just, not everyone can see me." At the bottom was a tiny round symbol, like an old nurse badge design that hadn't been used in nearly a decade. I brought the note to an older nurse. She stared at it for a while, then said with a trembling voice, "This really is Khan's. He died during a night shift in 2014. Electrical shock while cleaning the freezer. No one knew. He was found the next morning." I stood frozen. She added softly, They say his spirit never moved on, because he quietly continues the work he never finished. That night, I sat alone in the duty room, eyes stinging. I placed a cup of coffee on the table. The seat across from me was empty. But I smiled, and whispered, "Tonight's shift still has 2 people, right?" And maybe, somewhere in the corner of that room, my friend still sat. Quietly, silently, helping me through another long night not yet over. I never thought I would reach the very end of the darkness. But after everything that happened, from the cries inside the morgue drawer, the bloody handprints of a child, the ambulance that drove itself, the shadow on the rooftop, to the colleague who never existed, I understood that what I was standing in wasn't just a morgue. It was the final knot of forgotten souls, buried secrets, and truths someone had tried to hide for over a decade. I began to piece everything together. All the strange occurrences happened during night shifts. Every ghost I encountered was tied to an unexplained death, and it seemed they all had one thing in common: suspicious or altered records. I remembered Khan's last words, "Not everyone can see me." And I understood, maybe I was chosen not to fear, but to see, to uncover. I decided to find a way to access the hospital's archive in the basement. A place locked behind a high-level password, only accessible to the chief physician. I quietly observed him for days, memorizing his login steps. One night, while on duty alone, I took the risk and broke into the system. The password finally worked. The digital vault opened silently. Hundreds of records appeared, and among them, one folder stood out. Section 13, internal use only, not for public release. I opened it. Each file held a familiar name. Lati Min Han, the mother. Tran T Mai, the nurse. Nguyen T Tin, patient D2. The unnamed boy, traffic accident victim. Khan, the electrocuted nurse. Each person had a file, but all were marked, information withheld, internal reason. I read line by line, each word weighing heavier on my chest. One woman died due to a surgical mistake, but the file stated, pre-existing condition relapse. Another suffered a drug reaction, but was labeled as suicide in the restroom. Some surgeries failed due to protocol errors. Yet everyone was forced to stay silent under pressure from higher-ups. Some tried to speak out, and then vanished. Like Nurse Mai, like Khan, they all knew. They all tried to sound the alarm. But no one listened. No one dared stand up. And the price they paid was eternal silence. I found one last file with no name. Only a date. The 3rd of March 2014, not archived. I opened it. It was a single audio recording. A brief message in a woman's voice. If someone finds this recording, please help me speak the truth. They've used this hospital to cover up mistakes. Those souls, they can't move on. Because they're still waiting for someone to speak. That voice, it was Nurse Mai. I sat frozen for hours in front of the screen. Tears rolled down without me realizing. Not from fear, but from sorrow. From pain. So many had passed away without a goodbye. Without anyone standing up for them. I saved all the data, copied it into 3 versions, and hid them in 3 separate places. The next morning, I printed one copy and quietly left it on the hospital director's desk. I didn't sign it, I didn't say a word, but I knew I had done the right thing. That night, for the first time in weeks, I sat in the on-call room without fear. I lit an incense stick, placed it on the table, watched the security cameras, and I saw, not one, but many white figures, standing silently in the corridor under the dim lights. Not blurry, not in a rush, not angry, just silent. A moment forever etched into my memory. Then one by one, they turned and walked away, disappearing into the light at the end of the hallway, never to return, as if they were finally free. I stayed until dawn, watched the incense burn out, and understood this. I didn't save them. They awakened me, helped me see what so many chose to ignore. And from that moment on, the morgue was no longer just a place of death to me, but a place where souls waited for someone brave enough to speak for them. Those souls are gone, but their stories remain. Thank you for walking this journey with me, where darkness isn't only fear, but also truth yet to be named. If you found this video thought-provoking, please subscribe. so you won't miss the next stories about the silent things that happen in our world and the whispers from the other side. Because sometimes, just one subscription is how you show you've also believed in things you can't see but know exist.